I was 19 years old at the time of the accident. Before that, I'd had a fairly active life. I lived in the country, I had a lot of siblings, I was very competitive and loved playing ultimate tag. I loved volleyball, anything like that. I liked running around outside, being active, and I was also a very independent and imaginative person. I was a girl whose head was full of stars and dreams. Anyways, so it was Sunday and we were at our family reunion and I was wearing a brand new dress. It was Sunday and my cousin Danny came up and he's like, "Hey Grace, come on a bike ride with me and your brothers." And I thought they were going to leave me behind. And they'd gotten me a ladies bike that had room for my skirt, so I didn't even change my dress. I just jumped on the bike and went with them. So we rode down the road a little ways and turned off onto a little gravel road. And there's a super steep hill that we drove our bikes. Okay, actually, I pushed my bike up. It was a good exercise. And we went up the hill, went a little ways farther, and then turned around to go back. And I started going down the hill, and I started picking up speed really fast. And the bike was going so fast on this gravel road, and it was so bumpy that like my arms were hurting from how hard the handlebars were shaking. And I didn't want to brake because I thought that I would fly over the handlebars. And this bike, it had really thin, smooth rims. It was like a city bike, so it didn't have enough traction to get all the way down the hill at that speed. So I ended up about halfway down. I lost balance, and I ended up rolling the rest of the way down the hill. So, I mean, at first when that happened, I wasn't really scared. I was mostly just irritated. I mean, I knew I'd hurt myself fairly badly because I couldn't really move a lot, but my cousin came over and started like cutting off my leggings and wrapping my leg up, and I was irritated about that. And I was supposed to be meeting my new boss the next day, and I knew I was probably gonna have to miss that. And I ruined my brand new dress that I was wearing for the first time, so I wasn't very happy about that. I didn't realize how big of an ordeal this was gonna end up being. And by some chance, and it was more of a God thing, by providence, we were there and we didn't have cell coverage where we were, and a car came driving up the road, and it was a total stranger, but this guy happened to be a ex-paramedic, and so he came out and saw us there and checked me over and made sure I was okay. And then he actually drove me back to the house because I obviously couldn't walk. And at this time I was starting to freak out a little bit, and I was trying to hold myself together and be strong, or I don't know, try not to cry. But when we got back to the house and my mom came running out, I totally lost it. From there, my mom and my dad took me to the emergency room, and they looked me over and took x-rays and whatnot to make sure I hadn't broken any bones, which I hadn't, thank God, but I had ripped my knee open about 4 inches across and all the way down to the bone, and it was just packed with gravel. So they spent hours trying to clear all that out. Every time they got a little bit lower down, they'd have to renumb me because they got farther down where the numbing medicine hadn't been able to reach, and we were just there for forever. And finally, they put in some really heavy-duty stitches since it was so big, wrapped me up with a Band-Aid, put a good brace on it, gave me some crutches, and sent me home. So I was on bed rest for 2 weeks, I want to say, after that, and I really couldn't get around at all by myself for those first 2 weeks. And my mom would come out and like stretch my leg for me. She'd just like grab it and lift it up, and my sister came and spoon fed me a couple times. But yeah, I was on bed rest for 2 weeks, and what the ER people told us after I got my stitches out, because we went back there to get them out, and they were just like, give it a couple months, 3 months, you should be back to normal. And I waited 3 months and I wasn't back to normal. I was still in a lot of pain every time I walked. I couldn't walk without pain. I couldn't run. I couldn't jump. My leg was really stiff. And if I tried to put weight on it, a lot of times it would just buckle. I'd just like fall forwards. And so I started going to physical therapy, which definitely helped a little bit. But I told my therapist that I had gravel in my knee, so they hadn't been able to get it all out. And when he heard that, he was like, oh my goodness, like you should go get an MRI done. So I went and had an MRI done, and went to my doctor, and she was like, you should talk to a surgeon and see if this is something that needs to be taken care of. Maybe this is why you're still having so much trouble. So I went to a surgeon, and he was like, we can do surgery and try to take that out. It might help, it might not, it shouldn't hurt, so it might be worth a go. At this time, it had been almost 2 years since I had had the accident, and I was still having a lot of trouble. And I really struggled with this. I was very independent beforehand, and at this point, I wasn't doing a lot of things for myself. I wouldn't even like help around the house, like wash dishes or anything. Like I'd just sit and watch everybody else do it. We would go places, and everybody would be running around having fun, and I'd be sitting watching. And I was kind of getting to the point where, like, this is probably going to be it. I'm going to be immobile and in excruciating pain for the rest of my life. I actually left a job that I was working at the time because I couldn't keep up with it anymore with my injury. So I remember one day I was just sitting in my room, and I was just crying and asking God, why is this happening to me? I remember I grabbed all my crutches and my brace and anything that had to do with my accident that was in my room, and I just took them and like shoved them under the bed and sat there and cried. That's when God just kind of like got a hold of me and grabbed my attention and reminded me that not only does he do all things for our good, but his plan is best. Like, he doesn't do things that are halfway or kind of okay. He only does things that are the best for his children. And he'd done that in my life before, and I'd seen him do it in the lives of my family before and friends. I don't know, he just got a hold of my attention, and then he just kind of gave me the words to the song. They just kind of flowed from my pen, and it really kind of changed my mindset from, oh my goodness, this is the most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. It changed my mindset from that to, God is using this for something absolutely fantastic in my life, and I just can't see the whole picture right now. And I mean, he does that all the time. You think of the disciples watching Jesus die on the cross, like, they're probably standing there like, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to anybody on the planet Earth. But what they could only see is a very small picture of what was actually going on. You know, that was the best thing that ever happened for humankind, is Jesus dying on the cross and saving us from our sins. Anyways, so I had surgery, and it didn't help, and in fact I started to decline, and they were like, well, you should try physical therapy again, just give it one more shot because there's nothing else that we can do. So I started going to physical therapy again, and I continued to decline. I was going twice a week, and they're just like, well, at this point you should probably start using a cane. So I was on a cane, and I was just holding on to the promise that no matter what my situation was, God was doing something special in my life. It didn't matter if things were ideal by, you know, my standards or the world's standards. By God's standards, everything was going just fine, and that was all I needed to know. So sometime after this, we had a really dear friend of ours who had heard us sing before, my family, and she asked us to come and sing at an event that she had called the Ramming Steer. And I was just like, I've got to sing my song. I've got to share my story. And so I'm not a piano player, but I started practicing on the piano. My poor family had to listen to all my practices, but I learned it on the piano and learned how to sing to the piano. And I performed my song. And while I'm singing this song, I could see out in the audience that, you know, people had tears in their eyes. Like, people who I knew for years and who were struggling with me through this journey, and complete strangers who had their own stories of heartache and pain. And people just came up to me after that and told me how much they were touched and, you know, encouraged me, and I was able to encourage them, and it was just really special. And I got to perform it, you know, more than once, a couple times at other places, and every time people were just really touched and really encouraged. And shortly after all of that, Abigail and Chris approached me and were like, hey, let's do a music video of this. And I was all gung-ho, like, let's do this. And I remember they sent me the final recording of it after we'd recorded it in the studio and they had finished, doing all their magic on it, and they sent it to me, and I was listening to it on my way to work in the morning, and I just started crying. I was like, this is God's work that He was working on in the shadows, giving me the courage and the strength and the ability to write the song and share my story with other people who were struggling and, touch them and do something I'd always wanted to do, which is music. So I just started crying, and, now I'm cane free, praise God. Am I 100% back to normal? I wouldn't say that, but I'm really thankful for the progress that I have made, and I know that no matter what my situation is, good or bad, even if the situation doesn't change to something that I personally think is good or ideal or anything like that, it's still exactly where God put me and exactly where I need to be for Him to be working His masterpiece. And I've learned to trust that He's working all things for my good, even in the shadows of my life.